Perfect. Let's sit here. We are going to build on this incredible presentation and show of humility and great ancestry that we just had. Thank you, Roman, really, for showing us the way and reminding us about anchoring ourselves in history, but also the future. So, André, let's sit down. And what I really want to start off with is think a moment about what we're doing here, because there are not enough of these conversations. Critical thinking is not on the rise. And I really want to show gratitude to Steffi as she starts to step down for the way in which she has brought us all together from very different walks of life, from very different disciplines, to bring us all into a variety of these disciplines in ways in which they join up and they stimulate our intellectual thought, but they also touch our hearts and our souls. So can we have a round of applause for what DLD stands for? Because we are seeing, as Roman so clearly said, a dictatorship with regard to GDP, but we're also seeing a growing dictatorship of dumbing down people. And I really want to bring this into the room. This is the elephant that we have to confront as we think through the ways in which we can get to that future that's so absolutely essential for us to survive. And part of that is understanding that in the conversation that André and I have had and so many other members of the Club of Rome, because I'm so proud that actually we're both members of the Club of Rome, so is Roman, so is Kate Rayworth, trying to unravel those dictatorships of thought and of systems that have made us hostage to a belief that we are better than nature, that we are beyond the ecosystems, rather than we are nature. And we are a tiny little speck in the universe. And this book that André has published builds on the thinking of the great ancestor. And I would really hope that you will go out and get it. It's called The New Nature of Business. And it anchors itself in history. It anchors itself in humility. And it very much anchors itself in humanity. And let me just start by opening with a very small excerpt. And then André and I, hopefully, will try to stimulate some further thinking on that theme. Mo Ibrahim, who is the founder of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, said, "What is the purpose of a company? Whom should it serve? Shareholders, employees, customers, community, or the planet?" André takes us on an exciting journey through his and his family's stewardship of Roche. So we are anchored in a family company, in a company that admits it's a polluter, and yet understands the deep relationship that that company and its family has with nature. André, you talked to us in your book around the three capitals, and how also the history of the company really reinforces those three capitals. Can you lead us on that pathway?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to DLD, and thank you very much for Sandrine. I've learned things about my book that I didn't know, so that's always very helpful when you start a conversation. Yes, maybe a couple of words about me. What sort of convinced me that it should be a good idea to write a book about the new nature of business? My father was a known zoologist. He was an ornithologist, specialist in birds, and I grew up in the Camargue, in the south of France, in the delta of the Rhone River. And he started an institute there, which was trying to study bird migration, and which over the years accumulated sufficient science and sufficient understanding of ecosystems to specialize into defending wetlands in the Mediterranean in particular. So on one side, this experience of nature, this experience of science, this experience of internationality, because scientists from the whole world came to the Camargue to study it. And on the other side, the fact that my great-grandfather started Roche. Roche Pharmaceutical, originally Hoffmann Roche, which is one of the number 2 or number 3, according to the stock exchange variations, biggest company in pharmaceutical in the world. With a big presence in Bayern, by the way. We have a research center in Penzberg. And I think the combination of these two itinerary makes me realize something very simple, and I think something that Roman also touched before. You know, we're all human. The people who work for Roche and the people who are trying to defend nature have a common agenda. And very often we have decided that the future has to be the dictatorship that you just mentioned. 1, 2, 3, so science doesn't talk to business, business doesn't talk to conservation, nature is something. All this is absolute rubbish, of course. We should be looking at this together. This is an emergency that is an international emergency. So how can businesses contribute to be part of the solution and not just part of the problem? The model we have been using in business, and that's the model I learned at business school, is the model that was sort of standardized or defined by the Chicago School of Economics, mid-70s, Nobel Prize winner in 1976, Milton Friedman. The business of business is business. So the role of a company is to make money. That money is then given back to society through dividends, salaries, and taxes, and society deals with the consequences of the value creation process. Well, I would contend that is absolutely absurd. You should not sort of worry too much about what happens at the end of the chain. You should look at the beginning. What are the root causes for the pressure on the environment? And in order to be able to do that in a sensible manner, we need impact tools. We need to be able to understand what impact we are having on the system. And if we want to measure impact on the system, it's not good enough to just look at financial flows. You also need to look at the 3 big capitals, and thank you for asking the question, the 3 big capitals that concerns us all. One is the human capital, us individually. Are we happy? Are we in the right place at the right time doing the right thing? Can we realize ourselves in our daily lives? Or are we trying to serve a system that we don't believe in? And we can come back to that later. The second one is the social capital. It's, all of us together. And why are you coming here to listen to a conference when you could be in front of the television watching the football? You come here because you want to exchange, because you want to think about ideas, because you want to learn from the others. I would contend that if we want to be happy in the human capital side, it's only possible if we contribute, if we are part of something bigger. And so the social and the human capital obviously work closely together, and we often ignore it. At the end of the spectrum is nature. The natural capital. Nature, not the panda, the tiger, the Amazon, the Black Forest. No, nature as the life system support on Earth. Without nature, there is no life. Protecting biodiversity is not a scientific concept. Protecting biodiversity is saving life. And if businesses have to sacrifice life in order to create value that help us to live in a society that we don't necessarily support, we are really literally, I think the English expression is having your knickers in a twist, isn't it?
Yeah, we definitely all have our knickers in a twist. And it's getting quite painful, actually.
Yeah.
I think we
especially
should
for men,
especially for men, exactly. Though we do also have a lot, so maybe I'm going to just stop you there just for 1 minute, because actually the knickers in the twist makes me think about a lot of men that are on a testosterone joyride for the moment. And I think coming to that masculine energy, what you are talking about is anchoring people, planet, and prosperity into everything that you do. That's the business line. And yet we're seeing that power, profit, and patriarchy, big patriarchy with a big P, and some know that I often transform the patriarchy to penis, because it is a way of visualizing how we've lost connection with what is most important. How do we shift this trend right now, where we see that those 3 Ps, and we're probably going to see the next administration in the US have 13 billionaires, so very wealthy individuals that are going to decide how the economy should be run, probably a continuous dictatorship of GDP. How do we open up their eyes? How do you open up the eyes of your peers that actually know that the 3 anchored peers should be people, planet, and prosperity? Those are the pillars of how we build a new nature of business.
I think the idea of measuring success is an important one here. And the system I just described, which is the current system, it very much favors people who can create value, who can amass money, creating inequalities that you just mentioned. I must say that the statistic of 16 billionaires in the new administration is absolutely frightening. And it's been described by President Biden in his farewell speech a couple of days ago when he spoke about a new oligarchy taking over America. I'm not sure if it was new, but it's certainly the case. There are two elements which I think can tell businesses that we need to change something. First of all, the prosperity model we have built now, and prosperity we do have. Huh? Look at us. I mean, you know, when I was born, there were 3.5 billion people on the planet. There are 8 billion now. The 8 billions now today live better lives than the 3.5 billion did in, well, I'm not going to tell you when I was born, did some years ago. And the reality is that this prosperity model has functioned, but that it shows real signs of danger. You know, we've lost 70% of biodiversity, according to the World WWF.
And inequality is growing.
Inequality is growing at a rate that's never been seen before. You know, you often hear the thing, oh, but in the Middle Ages, you know, the feudal system was unequal as well. Yes, but not on that scale. Now we're talking about really disparities which are phenomenal, and they've accelerated in the last 20 years. But there is also, you know, the anger and angst among the young generation. There are a lot of people around here which are much younger than I am. I mean, what is going to happen when you close your eyes and you think about you in 90 years' time? What is it going to look like? I mean, this insecurity is a real worry to bring about a fulfilled life. How can you be happy? Going back to the human business, if you don't really know what the future looks like. So, I mean, there are a number of elements which should really encourage us to think about resetting the system into creating lasting value, long-term value. 7 generations is a long target, but it's the way we should be looking at it. We should be looking at it for the eternity. So that's one thing. But the other thing, if I want to speak the language of business, you know, capitalism does 3 things: asset allocation, risk management, and competition. Well, risk. Who in his office today can sit down and make decisions about investments over the next couple of years without thinking about what the world will look like in 50 years' time? It's just no longer a possibility. If you don't take into account the risk of the future in your asset allocation model, you are just not professional.
So that brings us to a very interesting point, because we're both going, and several of us are all going, to Davos next week. And we've just seen the WEF report that has come out. And in the last 3 years, I've been really flabbergasted by the way in which the risk assessment and the evaluation by CEOs, and we talked about this, you know, the 2-year risk timeline, at least in 2023, the top 4 risk areas were linked to climate and biodiversity loss. Even biodiversity was up there in 2023. Including then underneath social risks, social tension, social unrest, immigration, etc. Now, we still have temperature and weather events as the top risk, but in the just released report, climate and biodiversity have gone all the way down. How is it? I mean, you're on the board, and I'm not going to put all the pressure on you, but what type of conversations, what type of reality check, how can we shake our businesses up and remind them of the ethos of what good business looks like?
I think here we have to deal about human psychology. You know, nobody likes change. It's not nice to be able to have to do something else. You know, the current system, as I said, has yielded a prosperity of sort. You know, we're not. So the reality of the climate emergency, which is more evident than ever. You know, flooding in Germany, the drought in the Far East. I mean, I can make a list of all these different things. It's more evident than ever that the climate is not responding to the usual factors, and yet the public opinion is less and less interested. It's very difficult to alarm people anymore. And this sort of lassitude is also reflected, of course, in businesses. businesses, because businesses want to serve their customer, and if they want to serve their customer, they need to listen to what public opinion says. And maybe you're going to think I'm a complotist, but don't underestimate the amount of energy that's been put by the defense of the current status quo to maintain the status quo where it is. The power of lobbying, the power of advertising, the power of energies that has been put into making sure that the debate is not only avoided, but also completely obliterated. I mean, it's frightening. There's also, of course, a question of liberal values in this. You know, for many years, for the past 150 years, everything that you did that helped the market, that increased turnover, that increased customer to consume, has been deemed as legitimate. But in the debate of ideas, liberal values tell us, no, no, we're not allowed to use the same thing. So, you know, we're in a society which thinks, globally, that Coca-Cola is good for your health. Is it? I mean, it's sweet lemonade. How can sweet lemonade be good for your health, no? But at the same time, we don't use the same power of relentlessness, of constantly staying on message, you know, Coke is it, in the public debate, in the debate of ideas. And that's where we need to go now. We need to make sure that this idea of a climate emergency, the real panic that should take root in us to do something, we need to revive that. And that's something that we can all do, and these sort of conferences can help for that.
Thank you, André. And I think this brings us to a few next thoughts. The first is the planetary emergency, actually, because I think we now, and even Secretary General Guterres has picked up on the planetary emergency. We published at the Club of Rome with actually the Potsdam Institute a planetary emergency plan, which was published actually 4 years ago. And we're still pushing on the key policy recommendations. As we see this rollback, and I think we're all feeling it, how can we anchor ourselves in some of the positives and come back to at least some hope of humanity? And I guess part of that is we have this trend, and I so agree with you, the status quo is anchored in trying to make us not move forward. We've seen the greatest pullout in history of our net zero targets by the oil and gas companies because they're making 2.8 billion windfall profits per day. It's a heck of a lot more profitable, and their shareholders are pulling them in that direction. But we're not only just seeing the oil and gas companies, and this is a little bit what I'm now calling the morality gap. We're seeing many companies pull out of their diversity criteria, pull out of their diversity commitments, out of their climate commitments, out of their net zero commitments. Many of them also pulling out of their democracy commitments and what it means to be a good business within a democracy. But then on the other side, we've seen for the first time an upsurge in governments trying to think through going beyond GDP, of placing a value on what matters, of looking at putting nature on the balance sheet. We're having live conversations around debt and the way in which we work with the Global South in the elimination of debt through the Bridgetown Initiative. And of course, the UN is really trying to push this through with the Bretton Woods institution of the IMF and also the World Bank. So we have this, on the one hand, real pressure to go backwards and to maintain the status quo, and on the other hand, unbelievable champions that are really trying to push us forward. What is our role, all of us, as a community, to ensure that we continue to go forward and also keep that inner hope?
You're very right, Sandrine, to underline this. The situation is not as bad as it was when the first Club of Rome report was published, The Limits to Growth, when the second version came, when now the Earth for All things. You know, there is a good element of public perception. And that element of public perception is becoming more and more obvious into the way that, well, just an example, the book I wrote, nobody would have picked up some years ago. Now it seemed to be corresponding to a certain demand. In particular, how do we integrate value creation into our daily life? And that's what I try to do in there. But the fact that we know more and more about not only the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity crisis, which to me is even more important, and that we continue to not do anything about it is what really worries me. If we're talking about human capital, we're talking about happiness, we're talking about self-fulfillment. Now, Roman just talked about us in front of the mirror in the morning when we shave or when we brush our teeth. How can we today go out in the workplace and do things in which we don't believe? If you have to act in a way which does not correspond to your values, you're schizophrenic. You know, schizophrenia is a disease. You need to see a doctor. You need to do something. And each one of us can just start this analysis in your own mind. What is it that I'm doing today to reply to the challenge of the future? And how can I address that in my daily existence? It's not just a question of stopping consuming or stopping traveling or stopping all these things. It's a question of yourself wanting to be at peace with yourself in order that you are happy. Because only a happy humanity will save the planet. If we are all in schizophrenic doubts, we are not going to go very far, I think.
And I think you bring up a really good point, which is one now also that I'm trying to practice, and so many of us, including yourself, but I would like to hope that all of us could practice, and that is hacking the inhumanity and the morality that is encroaching in our system, and making sure that everything we do, from every single conversation across our own value chain, is reinstituting humanity into everything that we do, reinstituting critical thinking into everything that we do, reinstituting dialogue and debate and not shying away and calling it wokeness because it's too easy to do so. Entering into difficult conversations because we need to better understand each other. And that also means, and I'll close with this and maybe we can have one final thought, the new narratives, the communications. You know, we were supposed to be in an AI session, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And you notice we haven't mentioned AI. And the reason for that is that this obsession with AI and technology is going to be our own demise. Absolutely, AI can be a tool for good. It can also be a mechanism for bad. Absolutely, technologies are part of the solution, but they are not the panacea. But I think what you so clearly show in the new nature of business is that actually it's coming back to make us as human beings whole again as part of nature, and that companies can do well. Our new clean industrial plan is the new nature of business. Final thoughts?
Again, you took the wind off my sail, but you're absolutely right into trying to catch this stuff. I would just like to say something a little bit on the margin of what we've discussed until now. We are all here thanks to the DLD conference. We have here an organization which philanthropically has decided to push these ideas. What we need to do, and I think that's really what I was trying to say previously, we need to not only think that philanthropy is going to cure this, we need to bring all this thinking into our daily real life. The important thing, and that's a sentence I've used in the past which I really like, it's not how you spend the money that matters, it's how you make it.
Yeah.
And so if we don't, as humanity...
Can you repeat that again, please?
It's not... Are some people not listening, you think?
No, I think we just need to bellow it out.
It's not how you spend the money that matters, it's how you make it. And as humanity, we've been very good at... But at humanity, we've been very good at extracting things in an amoral way, in saying it's for everybody's good, because once we have money, we can spend it on philanthropic projects. And that is not the right way to proceed. That's a model we've been trying since the indulgences in the Catholic Church, since immemorial times. That's not working. We need to make sure that we don't create the problem when we make the money, rather than just trying to remedy it by spending it at the end. So really, and by the way, the book is on Amazon. Yeah, photo.
Speaking of a philanthropist as well, thank you, André. And I think what you say there is really the crux. And Steffi and Lisa and the rest of the incredible Berta family, I would really urge you next year to bring in a real conversation around it's not how you spend the money, it's how you make it. Because I think that is... Those 13 billionaires have made that money on the back of depleting resources and growing poverty. Those 13 billionaires, many of them in the town that I grew up, Palo Alto, have decimated California and San Francisco, which has now become the highest rate of homelessness and drug addiction, and is now labeled as Poop Town, which previously was Calcutta. It is not how you spend the money, it's how you make it. They created homelessness. They made it difficult for people to live decent lives and livelihoods. Go out and get this book because it shows us how to be human again in a business and how nature is our core. It's not a sideshow. Thank you.